Hey guys, Mr. Pokey here again, back with another video. So, Jing Yuan's banner just dropped, and I'm pretty sure everybody's super excited to using him. You know, some of the whales may be putting for E6, rank 5, all that kind of good stuff. And I'm sure everybody is interested into how to best make use of Jing Yuan, what kind of team comps work with him, what kind of gear, what kind of main stats, substats that Jing Yuan will require. And I'm glad to say that I basically have this video prepared, and I've done quite a lot of research and insight. Essentially, there are tons and tons of amazing CN cherry crafters out there with tons and tons of math, but unfortunately all their videos are in Chinese, so I essentially took the liberty of translating some of their resources back into my own spreadsheet, and in hopes that you guys can have a better understanding on how to make use of Jing Yuan more effectively. Right. So if you guys just take a look over here, I'm essentially working on this HSR CN analysis, where essentially every single time there's new units, or even for old units, I'm still working on it. I'll try to add in the notes for all the previous units that CN bros have essentially made the math at Terrycraft, and what are the best compositions that you can use the unit on. So this episode will essentially be going through with Jing Yuan today, and this is essentially what the CN bros have cooked up, and I would say that the sources that I've obtained for Jing Yuan with regards to any sort of future CN units, right? I'm taking from more reputable sources, because even though they are from CN and CN bros are like super smart and stuff, there's still gonna be some sources that may not be an accurate representation of the unit itself. So I'm glad to say that the sources that I've gathered here today, they are extremely detailed. They've done like tons and tons of math. Some guy did the coding simulations for like more than 10,000 simulations of any unit, and I'll be dropping the references here, so you guys can know that the sources here that's provided by CN are not just like any random CN sources. They are actually pretty reputable. So this will be the standard that we'll be using going forward for future units. So just want to take a moment here. Huge shout out to Timaeus. Essentially, this spreadsheet was also his idea, where we both will be working on the spreadsheet together. And anytime a senior bro posts out some very interesting cherry crafts regarding to any sort of units or team comps, we will definitely be updating the spreadsheet over here. So he's already done a video on it, and he's giving me a shout out. So even though I'm a super small content creator, I just figured I'll return the effort back, right? Tim and I has gone way back since the Artery Gear days. Super solid fella. So yeah, excellent content. Without further ado, let's just dive straight into it. For the first section, I'll essentially be going through what are the two team comps that will best benefit Jing Yuan. So there's two different comps right now that we can use. One is the comp with Asta/Ting Yun, and another one is with Bronya/Ting Yun. Right. So between these two comps, Asta is the comp that is technically easier to build. For most players, even for whales, it's a lot easier to build, just because that the Bronya and Ting Yun comp requires more relic requirements, where essentially you want to have at least 140 speed on Bronya, as well as obtaining E1 for Bronya. So this can be a little bit quite out of reach for most players. So I would say that Asta/Ting Yun comp would be more suited for early game players such as ourselves, and unless you're like an Omega whale that E6, R5 and all that kind of good stuff, right? So just to go through very generically what sort of sets and subsets you'll be looking at, for Jing Yuan is essentially the same. You're not going to change this much, with the exception to your leg. Either you want to run speed or attack. I will go into this a bit more in depth later, but essentially everything else is the same. You're going to be running the sizzling set as well with Sao Soto. Crit or crit damage body depending on the number of substats that you have, but generally speaking, crit main stat will work better in the early game, because it's pretty difficult to get a lot of crit from other sources, right? For the rope, you're going to be running attack, and the ball, you're going to be running lightning damage. Pretty self-explanatory there. For a light cone, before dawn, his light cone is absolutely insane. But if you don't want to pull for before dawn, you can technically go for the peaceful day, which is the battle pass light cone that is over here. Its effects are not that pronounced in the early stages, but after getting 5 copies of this, this is essentially a massive damage boost that can apply to all instances of damage. So it's honestly not that bad of a replacement if you choose to not pull for before dawn. Personally for me, I went for a light cone, and sad to say, I freaking lost a 75-25. So yeah, putting for light cone is not cheap, and if you guys don't want to spend that much resources, buying 5 battle pass is honestly kind of more worth it, not including all the resources that you gain from the battle pass. So just a thing to consider. Right, for Ting Yun, you're going to be running Musketeer set as long as Fleetless. Musketeer because Ting Yun would like both attack percentage and speed, and Fleetless is just because since it's an all-around attack percentage buff. So there's that. For legs, this is going to be the same for all across the board. It's going to be leg, speed on leg, and energy on rope. The chest and ball, not really that important. It's really up to you. You can go for survivability if you want to, or you can just go for more damage. So it's really up to you. For a light cone, you're gonna be running Planetary Rendezvous. This light cone is really good with Ting Yun because she's also lightning element, and this gives you like up to, I believe, 24% damage increase as long as the same element, which is gonna be Jing Yuan, because Jing Yuan is gonna be our hyper carry, right? So that's that. For Asta, there is no hard requirement for the gear set because technically there isn't a lot of gear sets that synergizes perfectly well with her. But I guess if you really got nothing better, you can just run Musketeer because it's only set that provides speed. For your 2-piece, you're going to run Von Wak just for higher energy regeneration as well as action bar bonus, right? Leg is very similar to Ting Yun. You basically run speed on leg and rope on energy. Everything else is the same. For Light Cone, this is very interesting. CN Bros recommended to run this 3-star light cone known as Cox. So what Cox essentially does, or mashing Cox, is it gives the user +8 energy whenever they auto attack or receive damage. And this is going to be huge for Asta because 90% of the time on Asta, we will be running her auto attack most of the time. Very rarely will we ever use her E because number one, it costs too much skill points, and most of our skill points allocation is going to be all to Jing Yuan as well as Ting Yun, right? Secondly, since we have a pretty high uptime on auto attacks, the additional energy generated from Cox will allow us to give our speed buff faster. That's why CN actually recommended this 3-star light cone, much to my surprise, right? So that's that. I'll go through the turn cycles a little bit together. But for Bronya's comp, Jing Yuan is essentially the same, except that your leg changed to attack percentage. Why is this so? I'll also explain later on. But TLDR version is because you don't need speed on Jing Yuan because Bronya will be the one doing the action bar pulling all the time. You're gonna be using E on Jing Yuan all the time, so his speed doesn't really matter, right? Everything else remains the same. Ting Yun, her gears remains the same. Bronya's gear, you can either run Musketeer set or the Ego set, which is the Wind set, and Von Wak for energy regeneration because we want as much energy regeneration as possible on Bronya for her to cast her out, since her out has a pretty long cooldown time, right? A pretty long energy cost. For leg and rope is the same, speed and energy. And for her light cone, you can run her signature light cone, or you can run Dance to give an action bar boost. Take a note over here, Dance effect, where it says the entire team's action value increases by a certain amount, right? This Dance effect actually does not affect Lightning Lord at all, right? So even after casting Dance, if your Lightning Lord is at 140 action value, for example, it will still be at 140 action value. So this is actually very good for us because you want Jing Yuan to go fast, but you don't want the Lightning God to go fast so that he can cycle enough turns to provide attack stacks for Lightning Lord. So yeah, Dance is also a very good alternative, right? So when it comes to turn cycles, okay, just to briefly explain what I mean by turn cycles, right, is your E is essentially your skill. If you want to use a skill, it will be abbreviated as E. A is basically your auto attack or your Q button, but we'll just call it as A. So an example over here for Asta and Ting Yun comp is Asta will out every EAA. So using a skill once and auto attack twice. Ting Yun will out every EAAA, and Jing Yuan will out every EEE. You will be always using E on Jing Yuan because he does not provide any sort of attack stacks to the Lightning Lord if he's using auto attack. Alright, so you'll always want to be using his skill. And the reason why Jing Yuan can out with only 3 skills is because Ting Yun's out gives him 50 energy. That's why he's able to do this cycle. So this is the ideal cycle that will be running for Asta and Ting Yun comp. As for Bronya and Ting Yun comp, it's very similar. For a fast Bronya comp, like the one over here, Bronya will auto attack first because she'll be extremely fast. She'll be the first in the turn, and after auto attacking, then she will use her skill on Jing Yuan. This will allow Jing Yuan to use E twice within a single turn cycle, right? So Bronya auto attacks, and then Jing Yuan skills, and then Ting Yun just doing whatever Ting Yun is doing, and then Bronya will use a skill on Jing Yuan again for him to skill again, right? You don't want Bronya to skill right now because it's a waste of value since it's going to be Jing Yuan's turn after this. So this is why we go with AE for Bronya's turn cycles. Ting Yun and Jing Yuan, exactly the same, nothing much to say over here. Right. So that is essentially how these two comps will work for the highest possible DPS values they can gain out of Jing Yuan at the current moment. Either you run Asta Ting Yun or Bronya Ting Yun. But Ting Yun essentially is almost indispensable. You almost always want to run Ting Yun just because of one, Ting Yun works with Planetary Rendezvous, and the attack, the damage percentage boost, because they are both same element, will work really well with Jing Yuan. And all the buffs that Asta provides is good on Lightning Lock as well, because unlike Bronya, the buffs that Ting Yun provides last more than one turn. So Lightning Lock can also eat the effect of the buffs provided by Ting Yun, right? So Ting Yun is almost like non-negotiable. You almost always want to run Ting Yun. So with that out of the way, we'll be going to some notes over here. Right. So for Ting Yun, you should note that when the Ting Yun's E buff only has one turn left on Jing Yuan, you have to cast E again, because after Jing Yuan's turn ends, the E buff would disappear, and Lightning Lock will not be able to gain any of Ting Yun's E buff. Yeah, remember to cast Ting Yun's skill when there's only one stack left. Right. Secondly, this only applies, of course, if Lightning Lock is slower than Jing Yuan. So if you know that Lightning Lock is gonna go before Jing Yuan for the next cycle, then there's no need for Ting Yun to cast E ever again. There's no need for Ting Yun to cast E when there is only one stack left. Right. So if you see that Lightning Lock is above Jing Yuan and Jing Yuan still has one stack remaining on the buff, then you don't need to cast Ting Yun's E. So there's some Ting Yun notes. For Asta, this is just a little note on casting it out. It doesn't really apply to just Jing Yuan alone. It applies to any unit. So for the target, right, when you want to cast Asta out on the target, so for example, you want to aim for Jing Yuan to gain the maximum speed buff coverage, you should only cast it during Jing Yuan's turn and not Asta's turn. Alright, so this buff, let me just zoom in, covers up very nicely, because if you were to cast Asta's speed buff during her turn, then it will only give Jing Yuan one speed buff. Because after Asta's turn, it's Jing Yuan's turn, right? So this is the part where he gains the speed buff. But when it's Jing Yuan's turn again, the buff has already expired. So effectively, you only gain one turn of speed buff. But if you were to cast Asta's buff during Jing Yuan's turn, he will gain the speed buff from this whole duration and this whole duration, right? You're missing this chunk essentially if you cast it not in Jing Yuan's turn. So that's essentially what I just want to get across, and only cast Asta's out during the carry buff, during the carry's turn that you want to buff. This applies to Jing Yuan, it applies to Seele, it applies to anybody, right? So that's that. And another note to point out is some people might say it is possible for Asta to achieve out with only two skills, right? EE. But this is not ideal for our comp, because this is very, very skill point heavy. And the whole point of running Asta with Ting Yun and Jing Yuan is because Asta, personally as a character herself, she doesn't need that much skill points, right? She just needs to hit enemy with her auto attacks and charge up with the passive attack buff as well as the speed buff in her ultimate. So really, she's not there for you to spend and allocate your skill points on her. So in most situations, you will always want to stick with EAA, so you can cast it out in 3 turn cycles. So that is for Asta's notes. Now, for the last notes for Bronya, you should know that Bronya's E, her skill, does not work on Lightning Lock because it only lasts 1 turn. So the moment you cast this on Jing Yuan, yes, he can do his ultimate, he can do his skill, it will benefit from the Bronya's E. But by the time his turn ends, then the buff is gone. So there is no more buff for Lightning Lock. So her being there is purely for her action advance as well as her ultimate in terms of the benefits to Lightning Lock, right? So that's just something to take note. And with regards to speed, she needs to be faster than Jing Yuan on her first turn, as well as being fast enough to gain the second unit turn before the first absolute turn. So what I mean by this, as you can see from this little chart, let me just zoom out. You want her to auto attack first, before Jing Yuan, and then after Jing Yuan casts a skill, you want her to go again. So this is before the first absolute turn ends. You want her to be fast enough to do this, so that Jing Yuan can still go a second time before the Lightning Lock. If she's not fast enough to do this, then it's going to be very, very problematic to run Bronya, right? I'll go into how you can run Bronya if your speed is not there. It's going to be lower, but for the most ideal situation, you will want to run fast Bronya so that you can do the auto attack, Jing Yuan skill, Bronya skill, Jing Yuan skill. This is the best DPS scenario, but if your Bronya is not fast enough, I'll also explain later on briefly how you can make the team work for Bronya, right? Okay, so that is that. With regards to out, you will want to save Bronya's out before Lightning Lock's turn for the biggest damage increase, because yeah, it's quite self-explanatory, right? If you cast your ult too early, then Lightning Lord can only effectively gain one ultimate buff if you cast it like too much. So you want to ideally just cast it right before Lightning Lord goes. Right, so that's next. Turn cycle, I've already explained. This comp, and the reason why I say that Bronya and Tingyun is the endgame comp is because the comp itself has extremely high skill point demand compared to Tingyun Asta. Because Asta herself, she can just auto attack most of the time. She just needs to skill once and she can just keep auto attacking. But for Bronya, you are cycling between AE, right? So there's more skill point usage requirements with regards to this comp. So if you do not have E1 Bronya, this is gonna be quite difficult to pull off because you're gonna face into a lot of skill point issues. And when that time comes and you cast Bronya E, you won't have enough skill points for Jingyuan. Then Jingyuan has no choice but to use his auto attack, right? Okay, but why do you want to cast Bronya's E on Jingyuan if he has no skill points? That is because even though it is not ideal, this situation is not ideal, it's not ideal for Jingyuan to not cast his E, since first of all he doesn't even provide stacks to Lightning Lord, right? Using auto attack doesn't provide stacks. But you still want to cast Bronya's E whenever possible because when you cast it on Jingyuan, at least his auto attack still generates him energy, right? Because Jingyuan's ultimate is like provides 3 stacks. So as much as possible, you want to cast Bronya's E to Jingyuan, even if Jingyuan cannot use skill. But this is really like the not ideal scenario. You always want to be casting Jingyuan's skill if possible. But in the event that you do not have E1 Bronya, you'll most likely face into this issue, so you just have to deal with it, essentially. Musketeer and Ego set I mentioned briefly just now. They both work, but Ego set would be more ideal in the end game because as you get more and more speed subs on your gear, right, then Ego's action bar push after Bronya uses ultimate is gonna give her technically more action value than higher speed from Musketeer. And Bronya don't really want attack anyways, so it's just a 6% speed buff. So end game, Ego will be more ideal, so, as long as you have the relevant speed subsets. Right. Alright, so now before looking at the speed check part, I want to bring you guys attention to speed versus attack percentage boots on Jingyuan. Right. So in a vacuum, Jingyuan needs 140 speed to have 2 unit turns before Lightning Lord's turn. This is in a vacuum. So 140 is a benchmark, right? And because of this, there are people recommending attack percentage boots on Jingyuan instead of speed boots, because technically Asta's ultimate buffs Jingyuan's speed to the benchmark, as long as you have Asta's ultimate, right? But this recommendation is not realistic because Asta's ultimate only lasts for 2 turns, and she can only out every 3 turns. With Von Walk and Energy Rope, with our cycle which is EAA, she can only out every 3 turns. So in the speed buff downtime, that 1 turn of speed buff downtime, both Jingyuan and Lightning Lord's action value will increase with their slow speed, right? And after this increase, when Asta casts her out again, Jingyuan is now no longer able to lap Lightning Lord twice because Lightning Lord's action value have also increased over here. And because of this reason, you still need to build speed on Jingyuan even if you're running Asta, because of that downtime. So how much speed do you want to build on Jingyuan? Right? So to account for this, the recommended speed for Jingyuan across most comps, especially comps with Asta, is going to be 114.7/115.8, but we're going to be rounding it up to 115 and 116 respectively. The difference is at Asta E5, you can actually have 1 speed less downtime, but if you don't have her, then you will want to run 116, right? So this will still allow Jingyuan to have 2 unit turns before Lightning Lord's turn, even with Asta's out downtime. That's why 115 speed is and 116 is a very, very important checkpoint to be hit. And as such, it's gonna be very, very difficult for players to try to find plus 17 speed subs for Jingyuan without speed boots. So although it's achievable, it is very, very unrealistic, since it's going to be 9 speed rolls, and also if you want to roll 9 speed rolls on sub, it essentially translates into less rolls on your crit and crit damage, right? Yeah, but it is still possible to achieve this if you want to run attack percentage boots. Our alternative solution is just run speed boots on Jingyuan. You don't even have to add like fully upgrade the speed boots, because Jingyuan only needs like 115/116 speed. So you really just need to have like a plus 9 speed boots for Jingyuan to achieve the benefits of having 2 unit turns before Lightning Lord's turn, right? So our recommendation, it'll be explained a bit further later on. Essentially, just get a plus 9 speed boost on Jingyuan for all comps except for fast Bronya comp. For all other comps, you want speed boost on Jingyuan to plus 9, And then later on, when you play the game like half a month, 1 year, because you know how ridiculous clear grinding is in this game, when you essentially have a plus 17 speed on substats alone, then you can translate into attack percentage boots. But until that time happens, and the time is going to happen for a very, very long time later, you will want to run speed boots on Jing Yuan. Now, for Bronya comp, Jing Yuan doesn't need speed at all, since his turns will be solely detected by Bronya's E. Just to add on, this is for fast Bronya comp. This is essentially where Bronya is faster than Jing Yuan. All your speed is focused on Bronya, so you don't need speed at all, since Bronya's E skill will buff up Jing Yuan's action value. And ironically, you actually want him to be slower in the fast Bronya comp, so that the Bronya speed requirement to lap Jing Yuan won't be as high. So for the speed requirement, we'll be taking a look. I've already explained it just now, so there's that. So TLDR, you still run attack percentage boots on Jing Yuan comp for fast Bronya comp, right? But in this event that you don't do this, you want to run speed boots on Jing Yuan. So that is essentially the rationale behind speed and attack in a gist. So to go even more in depth into this, right? These are the benchmarks that are recommended. So for the recommendations, like I mentioned earlier on, you want to have a +9 speed boots early in the game, so they can hit the benchmark of 115/116 without really sacrificing that much, right? But eventually, later on, when you eventually can get 17 or 18 speed subs for subsets alone, you can switch the speed boots out to attack percentage boots. But that's going to be later on in the game. So that is the benchmark for Asta comps. For Bronya comps, you just essentially don't want any speed subs on Jing Yuan add-on. But for Bronya's speed, you want her to be at 145. And this is going to be quite difficult to obtain, because with speed main stat alone gear, this is not going to hit it. You still need a lot of speed subs steps for fast Bronya. So this is also just another benchmark that you have to hit to do the fast Bronya comp. And because of that, yeah, it's going to be quite difficult to obtain until the end game for Bronya Ting Yun comp. Now, the last speed check for this is going to be for Ting Yun. So this is the part where CN Bros didn't really touch on how much speed you want to get for Ting Yun. So great thanks to Grimo who did the calculation. You essentially just want a 134 speed for Ting Yun. This is slightly lower if you manage to get E1, because E1 gives Ting Yun a little speed boost. But this is speed you want for Ting Yun to ensure that she goes before Jing Yuan and casts a skill on time. Yeah, so that's a checkpoint. And that will sum up essentially when you want to build speed and when you want to build attack. For 90% of the time, you want to build speed. For the early game, just a speed +9 boots and you'll be done with it. Settled. Right. So next, just a little short part, attack percentage versus energy for Jing Yuan's rope. There are some arguments as to you can actually run energy rope on Jing Yuan because of that, his uptime will be faster, and since majority of his damage comes from his lightning rod, right, you just want to give lightning rod as much stacks as possible. But as you can see from the CN Bros calculation, this is actually not the case, because even if you run energy rope, you cannot generate the extra 20 energy needed to allow Jing Yuan to out with just EE and Ting Yun's out, right? So with the current standard cycle of Jing Yuan, EE plus Ting Yun's out, you're gonna be outing in 3 turns, right? So this changes if your Ting Yun is at E6, where your ulti provides 60 energy. So in this case, if you run energy rope on Jing Yuan, he can out with just EE. But the downside to this is he's outing so fast where your supports can no longer keep up their buffs, because your other supports cannot out in just 2 turns. They need more turns than that. And that's why it's still not ideal for Jing Yuan to just spam his out so fast. And as a result, maybe with more units next time to buff Jing Yuan's energy, we can consider energy rope, but with our current meta game, it is still ideal to just run attack percentage rope always. So that's just a little short introduction for attack versus energy. Now, the comparison between the comps. So this is the part where the min-maxers will be interested in, right? Which comps run the best with Jing Yuan? So, rule of thumb, double supports will always outperform single supports. This even if they are both combined together singly. Alright, 77% plus 67% is still going to be like slightly lower than this. So most of the time, if you want to run Jing Yuan, you want to run double support comps, because the advantage that they bring to Jing Yuan is just a lot more. Either Asta Ting Yun or Asta Bronya. And Asta Bronya, there's the slow team, which is the easier team, or the fast team, which is a lot harder to gear. Right, so that is that. Kuai Su Dui, which is the first team, which like I mentioned, is where Bronya goes before Jing Yuan, as well as being fast enough to cast E on Jing Yuan in the same absolute turn. For 慢速队, which is basically where Bronya goes after Jing Yuan. So this, for 慢速队, you still want to build speed boots on Jing Yuan, okay? You still want to build speed boots on Jing Yuan for 慢速队, because if not, he will not be fast enough for him to be before Bronya, since you're always going to be running speed boots on Bronya either case, right? So that's the two differences. And rule of thumb, I've already mentioned, Bronya Jing Yuan is just harder to build since this simulation, it relies on the fact that Bronya has E1. Right. Okay, since we're on the topic of this, the assumptions for the DPS simulations is as shown here. Right. All units are at level 80, and Jing Yuan and Bronya, they're both at E1. Okay. Bronya is at E1. This is the huge thing. If your Bronya is not at E1, you will face skill point issues, like I mentioned just now, and there will be times where Jing Yuan has to use his auto attack. And when that happens, this damage chart will not favor Bronya team at all. And most likely, your Asta and Team Yuan comp will perform better if your Bronya is not at E1. Right. So Jing Yuan is at 115 speed across all simulations except for the fast Bronya comp, where we've mentioned Jing Yuan is at 100 speed, or essentially no speed at all. All supports are on speed boots and energy rope, and the single support assumes that the comp that you're going to be running with single support is Jing Yuan plus the support plus the secondary DPS and tank. Since Jing Yuan is at skill points, our secondary DPS will be doing AE to generate enough skill points. Right. For double support, our fourth slot is going to be assumed to be a tank. And for the fast team, like I mentioned, your Jing Yuan speed is at 100 and your Bronya speed is at 145. So these are the assumptions for the damage shot comparison. So with that out of the way, Jing Yuan facing skill point issue is going to be a huge issue if your Bronya is not at E1. And therefore, the DPS will favor Asta Team Yuan comp. So this is just to be a note to be taken off. Don't take it at face value, right? And yep, Jing Yuan with double support will always outperform. And if you take a look at their raw differences, absolute differences between each team, right, you can see that fast Bronya team only outdamages slow Bronya team by roughly 6%, and the Asta team by roughly 10%. So in reality, it's honestly not even that bad if you cannot run the meta fast team comp. Right, it's not the end of the world. You're essentially just losing 10% of the damage if you're going to be running the earlier game comp. So don't despair, don't fret, don't try to like farm your legendary speed subs and speed gear, all that kind of stuff. It's okay. Like just run your +9 speed boots on Jing Yuan and run your Asta Team comp. You're going to be working out perfectly fine. There's not that much of a difference. We'll come to the final section after everything that I've rambled on. Fast Bronya / Team Yuan comp will outperform all others, but not by a large margin, as you can see over here. And they require really high gear investment because your fast comp, you need Bronya to have 145 speed, and you need Bronya to have Eidolon 1. So it's not something to be obtained right now for most players. And as such, free-to-plays and players in the earlier progression are advised to run Asta comp and Team Yuan comp, especially without Yuan Bronya. So this comp at 90% damage is going to be doing huge for you anyways. It's perfectly fine to run this comp. Right. With the exception of fast Bronya comp, speed boots are recommended for all Jing Yuan comps until you can achieve 115 or 116 speed. Until that happens, speed boots is recommended for all Jing Yuan comps until you can achieve this with attack percentage from subset 7. Right. So this is only a +9 speed boots, and therefore it's a really low requirement. You just need a little bit of experience and you can get a +9 foot, slap on it, and you can just use this for a really long time. Until eventually you gain a substat that lets you hit 115 speed, you can run this +9 speed boots for, very long time. And as players progress, feel free to replace the speed boots. Right. So, our last point. For the current MOC / Forgotten Hall content, due to our very limited unit pool, it is actually still advisable to run Asta Team Yuan comp with Jing Yuan, because this allows our Bronya to be paired with Seele for the second team. Without Bronya, your Seele comp with other supports or even other DPS is going to have a huge damage drop off. So this is essentially just opportunity cost, right? Do you really want to just run like an extra 3% or 10% if you're going to be running Bronya over Asta? Or you can have a whole lot more damage generated by your second comp from Seele. Opportunity cost. And that's why it's still advisable to run Asta Team Yuan for right now. But I believe this will change as we get future characters such as Luocha, Silver Wolf, all this kind of stuff. But right now for Forgotten Hall, it is still advisable to run Asta Team Yuan with Jing Yuan. Alright, and with that we've come to the end of the video. Pretty short compared to my usual 40-minute rambles. But yeah, hope you guys have a blast and all the best to your pools. Take care.